Have you ever stopped to think how a regional power, someone seemingly, well, outmatched, could actually challenge a global superpower? Not just challenge, but maybe even expose its limits.
It's a fascinating question, isn't it?
It really is. And today, that's exactly what we're doing, to deep dive into this very idea. We're
Yeah.
exploring the pretty remarkable story of Iran, how under just immense pressure, it navigated things to a point where, well, our source material says it exposed the limits of a superpower.
Yeah, and for this deep dive, we're leaning heavily on a narrative account called How Iran Exposed Superpower Limits. It gives this unique view on strategy, defiance, and this whole world of asymmetrical warfare.
Okay.
So our mission really is to unpack the key moments, the strategies that led to this situation, and maybe crucially, think about what it all implies for, global power today, and for you trying to make sense of it all.
All right, then. Let's get into it. Let's peel back the layers of this complex, decades-long story. To really get a handle on this whole confrontation, we need to go back, way
Right.
back. The seeds were sown really decades ago, 1979, the Iranian Revolution.
Right.
That's when the U.S.-backed Shah fell
Mhm.
and the Islamic Republic rose up. It fundamentally changed the whole region. And almost overnight, America and Iran became, as the source puts it quite vividly, sworn enemies.
And this wasn't just a short-term thing. We're talking over 40 years. Iran faced relentless pressure from the U.S. The source talks about crippling sanctions, isolation, and threats.
Yeah.
It even mentions how Iran got painted as part of the axis of evil.
Yeah, I remember that phrase.
But what the analysis shows, and this is interesting, is that despite all that, the economic warfare, the international pressure to Iran didn't collapse.
It didn't.
No.
Yeah.
Instead, the source says it adapted, it got smarter and tougher. So this initial resilience, it wasn't just about survival. The material argues it was an evolution. It showed that even a superpower trying hard to contain Iran could maybe inadvertently push it to develop strategically.
So, okay, Iran didn't just survive. It adapted. It innovated, like you said. But then what was the next step strategically? How did they move beyond just enduring the pressure?
That's where this idea comes in. The one our source calls Iran building a shadow empire.
A shadow empire.
Yeah. And it wasn't about matching the U.S. military directly. Not at all. We're talking concrete examples. Hezbollah in Lebanon, a major force there. Militias in Iraq, the Houthis down in Yemen controlling a lot of ground. And, as the source notes, deep influence in Syria.
So using proxies.
Exactly. And the source makes this critical point. Iran expanded influence with a fraction of the cost compared to, say, what the U.S. was spending on its own involvements.
How did they manage that?
Well, the source points to ideology, intelligence, and precision. Using these tools, Iran essentially waged asymmetrical warfare, bleeding America where it never expected. It was, you could say, a masterclass in using non-state actors to get, well, an outsized impact.
Wow. That really is a stark example of challenging military norms without, playing the same game. Makes you rethink conventional military power. So this long game, this chess match, did it reach a kind of flashpoint? Our source points to 2020, the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani.
Yes, that was huge.
What was the U.S. drone strike meant to achieve there?
Well, the source describes it pretty bluntly as meant to be a show of strength,
Okay.
which of course raised the big question, how would Iran react? And the account explains it wasn't, the kind of chaos maybe some expected. Instead, Iran launched calculated missile strikes on American bases in Iraq.
Calculated strike?
Calculated. And this part is key, according to the source. For the first time in decades, a state had openly hit U.S. forces and gotten away with it.
Got away with it.
That's the source's take. The message, it argues, was twofold. No American deaths, but a loud message. We're not scared anymore. So connecting that to the bigger picture, the source claims the myth of untouchable American supremacy cracked right there.
That definitely sent ripples, didn't it? It supports that claim that perceptions of power, of deterrence, really shifted, not just regionally, but maybe globally, too. The rules felt like they were changing. But Iran wasn't just using proxies or these calculated strikes, right? The source mentions other things, too, broadening the approach.
Right.
Like cyber war, hitting oil tankers, pushing the nuclear program right to the edge.
Absolutely. It was multifaceted. And of course, there were countermeasures. From Israel, from the U.S., the source mentions sabotage ops like Stuxnet, that famous cyber weapon aimed at their nuclear facilities.
Well, that's next.
Assassinations, explosions at places like Natanz. But, and here's that recurring theme again, the source emphasizes, Iran always rebuilt, and it adapted faster than expected.
Resilience again.
Resilience, but also strategic agility. It's why the material specifically suggests looking at Iran not just as a rogue nation in these actions, but as a chess player.
A chess player.
Yeah, implying, a long-term calculated strategy rather than just knee-jerk reactions.
When the source calls Iran a chess player on the world stage, what does that really mean for how we understand their power? Especially the kind that isn't just military hardware, which then brings us almost up to the present day, April 2024. Iran does something pretty unprecedented. It launches, over 300 missiles and drones directly at Israel. Directly. Not through a proxy this time.
That's right, a direct assault. And while the source notes that Israel, with U.S. and allied help, intercepted most of them.
Which was widely reported.
It was. But the source stresses the message behind the attack. It was clear. Iran could launch a full-scale assault, and no superpower stopped it in time. So regardless of how many got through, the event itself really shook things up. It changed perceptions of deterrence again, showing Iran's capability and, crucially, its willingness to act directly.
Yeah, it definitely makes you think about the calculation behind that risk. What was the desired outcome of such a bold move? And after that attack in April 2024, the source talks about this terrifying reality the U.S. was facing. What was that?
Basically a dilemma. Respond militarily and risk regional war, or show restraint and appear weak.
A tough spot.
A very tough spot. And Washington chose restraint. Now, the source points out this wasn't because they lacked weapons. Of course not. It was because, arguably, the U.S. had too much to lose.
Okay.
And the analysis in our source suggests Iran had calculated that perfectly. They knew the West's red lines and danced on the edge. This whole episode sent a powerful message globally. You don't actually need to be a superpower to stand up to one.
And how did that message land?
Well, the account highlights several ripples. First, across the Middle East, people cheered. To many, Iran didn't just survive, it won. Second, this idea resonated elsewhere. China and Russia took notes.
Interesting.
Also, Saudi Arabia reconsidered ties, Israel recalculated its deterrence. And ultimately, for Washington, it meant facing a harsh truth. Military might doesn't guarantee control.
So where does that leave us? What does this shifting dynamic, this whole story, mean for the future of international relations? And maybe for the idea of what a superpower even is anymore? It's a huge question.
Yeah, reflecting on this whole deep dive, it really wasn't, as you said, a story about a war won on some traditional battlefield.
Not at all.
It was a story, as our source puts it so well, won in strategy rooms, on diplomatic chessboards, through nerves of steel. Iran, the source concludes, might not have conventionally defeated a superpower, but it certainly exposed one, and maybe, in this modern era, exposure is power.
Exactly. Which leaves a final thought maybe for you, the listener, to consider. How might this idea, exposure as power, change what we think of as a powerful nation in the 21st century? And what does that suggest about all the non-military ways influence might work on the global stage now?